In 2007, Nokia controlled 50% of the global mobile phone market. Half the planet was carrying a Nokia in their pocket. Their revenue was bigger than the GDP of some countries. Their brand was so trusted that in remote villages with no running water and no electricity, people found a way to own one. Then, in fewer years than it takes most people to pay off a car loan, Nokia collapsed. The buyer paid $7.2 billion for what remained. Nokia had been worth $110 billion just 6 years earlier. So what happened? Not what you think. This isn't just a story about one company making one mistake. This is a story about a mechanism, a specific, repeatable pattern by which dominant companies destroy themselves, while everyone inside them is technically doing their job correctly. And that mechanism is running right now, in other boardrooms and other industries. Nokia is just a case study. Nokia was founded in 1865 in Finland as a paper mill, not a phone company, a paper mill. Over the following century, they moved into rubber, then cables, then electronics. They had already proven they could reinvent themselves. So when mobile phones emerged in the late 1980s, Nokia pivoted again. In 1992, new CEO Jorma Ollila sold off nearly every other division and went all in on mobile phones. The bet paid off at a scale that's hard to comprehend. By 2000, Nokia's market cap hit $250 billion. At their peak, they represented nearly 70% of the value of the entire Helsinki Stock Exchange. When Nokia's stock moved, Finland's economy moved with it. Their phones weren't just successful, they were beloved. The Nokia 3310 became one of the best-selling electronics products in history, famous for surviving nearly anything. Inside their headquarters in Espoo, a particular energy was building. The kind that arrives when you've been right for so long that being right starts to feel permanent. That energy has a name, complacency, and it's invisible until it's too late. January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs walks onto a stage in San Francisco and says, "Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything." Then he introduces the iPhone. Full touchscreen, no physical keyboard, or real browser, a camera, all in one device. What did Nokia do the next morning? They laughed, publicly. A senior Nokia executive said they didn't see the iPhone as a threat. Their head of multimedia dismissed the lack of a keyboard as a fatal flaw. One executive called it an interesting experiment that would struggle in serious markets. Nokia had 50% global market share and 60,000 engineers. From where they stood, a phone with no keyboard from a company that had never made a phone seemed like a curiosity. Their response wasn't irrational, it was based on real data. And it was completely wrong. Here's the part hidden underneath. Nokia had actually seen this future coming. Their own research teams had built working touchscreen prototypes years before the iPhone existed. But those prototypes never left the lab. Why? Because Nokia's profits came from a very specific business. Affordable, hardware-first phones sold by the millions, with clean, predictable margins. Building a true smartphone meant cannibalizing that exact business. Picture yourself as a Nokia executive in 2004. Your engineers show you an impressive prototype, but approving it means gutting the production lines generating your current profits and taking a multi-year hit to quarterly numbers your bonus depends on. So you slow it down. You protect today's numbers because that's what everyone in the room gets paid on. Steve Jobs faced the identical calculation. The iPhone would cannibalize the iPod, Apple's biggest revenue driver at the time. He approved it anyway, telling the world he intended to kill his own product before someone else did. That single difference in philosophy is where the divergence began. The collapse wasn't instant, and the pace is the most instructive part. In 2008, Nokia spent $8 billion acquiring Navtech, a digital mapping company, and then did almost nothing useful with it. In 2009, they rushed out the N97 as their iPhone answer. The touchscreen was unresponsive, the software unstable. First, you ignore the threat. Then you panic. Then you ship something broken because the panic moves faster than the engineering. Meanwhile, their operating system, Symbian, had been built for a world of small screens and physical buttons. Forcing modern apps onto it was like installing a modern kitchen into a building never designed for running water. Developers noticed. Apple's App Store launched in July 2008, and within a year had 65,000 apps. Developers built for iPhone because users were there, and users came because developers were there. Nokia had no such flywheel. By 2010, their market share had fallen to roughly 33%. Then came the decision that closed the chapter. In September 2010, Nokia appointed a new CEO, Stephen Elop, formerly of Microsoft. In February 2011, he sent an internal memo that leaked within hours and is still studied in business schools today. He compared Nokia to a man standing on a burning oil platform, forced to choose between standing still and jumping into freezing water. He was right about the danger. Then he announced the plan: abandon Nokia's own operating systems entirely and switch to Windows Phone. The reaction was swift. Windows Phone had almost no app ecosystem and no developer momentum. One analyst called it jumping from a burning ship onto a ship slowly taking on water. And the timing made it worse. Nokia had an N90-powered device nearly ready. Reviewers who eventually got their hands on it called it beautiful, smooth, the best phone Nokia had ever made. Nokia canceled it anyway, killing their most promising product in a generation to build Windows phones instead. People inside Nokia at the time described that moment as the air leaving the room. Now the numbers. 2010, roughly $110 billion in market value. 2010, down to around $40 billion. 2012, approximately $9 billion. 2013, Microsoft acquires Nokia's devices division for $7.2 billion. From $110 billion to $7.2 in 6 years. 2 years later, Microsoft wrote off $7.6 billion, more than they'd paid for the entire company, and laid off roughly 18,000 former Nokia employees. Step back from the details. Nokia's leadership weren't idiots. They had data, advisors, resources, and deep knowledge of the market they had personally built. They failed because of something that has nothing to do with intelligence. The incentive structures inside large, successful companies are almost perfectly designed to prevent the radical self-disruption that survival sometimes requires. Quarterly earnings reward short-term margin protection. Bonuses reward this year's numbers. The entire machinery of a public company pulls leadership toward defending what works today rather than building what will work in 5 years. When the future arrives slowly, that machinery wins. When it arrives fast, it destroys you. The iPhone arrived fast. Nokia did what well-run, rational companies do. They protected their margins, they managed risk responsibly, and they ceased to exist. Right now, there are dominant companies in other industries with large engineering teams and trusted brands who have been right for so long that being right feels permanent. Some of them have already built the thing that will replace them. It's sitting in a prototype lab somewhere, waiting for someone with the authority to weigh a short-term cost against long-term survival. And that person is looking at this quarter's numbers. Nokia's story is over a decade old now, and the lesson isn't being learned. So the real question isn't whether this happens again. That's already certain. The question is which company you're watching right now. Dominant, profitable, confident, that's already standing on a burning platform and simply doesn't know it yet.